Welcome back to March Madness Analysis, another edition of the weekly rankings coming to you again this week. Another exciting week of college basketball. The last couple weeks have been tough on the rankings, a lot of movement, a lot of teams surprising the nation, a lot of teams kind of not playing well as of recently. It's still a very, very tight race from about middle of the top 25 down to about 40. Very, very tight. However, we are starting to see a little bit of variation. Some teams are starting to separate. They're separating the best from the rest. So let's get into the rankings. A couple things I wanted to start out with. Illinois, jumped them back into the rankings. A lot of people didn't think I had them near high enough. I guess you can say they have a lot of semi-quality wins. They've got wins over Indiana, Penn State. I believe they just beat Purdue, if I'm not mistaken. Purdue or Maryland, one of the two. They have a few quality wins. So the win against Minnesota is starting to look pretty good now as Minnesota's jumping in the rankings. So I'm going to give them some more respect. Still not too high on them with their 3 losses. Definitely don't have them as high as I do in the AP poll, but put them back into the rankings. West Virginia, very surprisingly at number 14 in the country. 3 losses, a couple this week. Don't understand why they're so high with 3 losses. They don't have the quality wins. They're about neck and neck with Illinois, I guess. I think Illinois even has some better wins than West Virginia does. I don't really know why they're in the top 25. I had West Virginia at 30, way below where the AP had them. Don't understand why West Virginia is so high. Who else? Michigan State with 3 losses, lost 3 in a row. Still in the rankings. Very surprisingly, no idea. They're tied with St. Louis, actually, for number 23. So they're not 24. They're tied with St. Louis. But still very, very confusing. I had Michigan State at 36 in my rankings, so they're out. So some variation there. I don't understand why Texas Tech's still ranked. I didn't even have Texas Tech in my top 36. They're outside of my top 36. A recent loss to Oklahoma State definitely pushed them out of the top 25, and it really didn't seem to hurt them too much in the AP. Only bumped down to 18, which is very surprising, being that they only have 1 win by 2 points over Oklahoma. So I think they are a top 25 team, and I think they're going to play better and get some quality wins and become a top 25 team in the future. But right now, they've proven absolutely nothing. I don't think they're worthy of the top 25 at the moment. Now let's get into it. Gonzaga, Baylor. We've kind of been 1-2 all year. Although Baylor's starting to edge out Gonzaga. The more I've looked at their statistics, the more I've watched them play, their margin of wins, Baylor's starting to catch up with Gonzaga. It's kind of hard to put Baylor ahead of Gonzaga at this point with all of Gonzaga's wins, but they're right there. They're not far behind. Then you have Villanova at 3, Texas at 4, Iowa 5, Kansas 6, Creighton 7. Wow, we're in agreement in all of the top 7 spots there. The only reason I have Villanova ahead of Texas is because Villanova beat Texas earlier this year. Other than that, I think Texas has the quality wins. I think Texas they looked great against Kansas the other day. So I really wanted to put Texas ahead of Villanova, and they're pretty much neck and neck, but I have Villanova ahead of Texas because they beat them. Iowa played great last week, picked up a couple top 25 wins. They're up to 5 now. Kansas, the loss to Texas, didn't hurt them too much, just dropped to 6. Creighton at 7, they're still looking for that one signature win. They need some big wins coming down the stretch to secure them in the top 7, because right now, say they lose to, St. John's, an underrated St. John's team. That's going to bump them, and it's going to hurt them a lot. They need some quality wins to secure their spot up there and give them some breathing room in the top 10. Michigan, undefeated. I have them up the whole way up at 8. We'll see how they play, how they continue to play in the Big Ten. AP has them at 10. Tennessee, 9 and 10, kind of in the same spot. Picked up a huge win this week and a tough loss against Alabama. They beat Missouri, lost to Alabama. That was kind of a fluke game for them. I wouldn't think too much of it. I think Tennessee is an elite team, and I think they're going to stay in the top 10. They're really, really good, and that was just kind of a fluke game. If I'm a Vols fan, I don't think too much of it. Missouri at 11 played fantastic against Arkansas the other day. Watched that game. They looked great. Offense looked great. Rutgers is kind of staying in that area. I have them a little higher than the AP does. I like Rutgers. I think they have a pretty good team. Clemson, you could argue they're a little bit high. Picked up a huge win over Florida State, I believe. And I think Clemson's certainly a top 20 team. I obviously have them at 13, but I think Clemson's been playing very well. Houston is going to drop because of their loss to Tulsa, although they looked great against SMU, I will say. And, they're losing Mills, too, which hurts them a lot. Houston is at 11 in the AP, so they're a little higher, actually. Oregon at 15, they only have one loss to Missouri, who's proving they're a top 15 team. So I'm going to give Oregon some respect. They need some quality wins, much like Creighton. Louisville, don't know why Louisville's not ranked. A lot of people criticize me for having Louisville up at 16, but they have one loss to Wisconsin, who's number 8 in the AP right now. So I don't know why that hurts them that much. Florida with one loss picked up a huge win over LSU. I have them at 17. Could argue they're a little high, but I don't know who you'd put ahead of them. Minnesota with a couple losses, a couple great wins too. They're playing well. Marcus Carr has been great, and he's got weapons around him. So Minnesota's up at 18. Minnesota's at 16 in the AP. We've already talked about West Virginia. Virginia is just kind of staying in around that 20 spot. They need some wins bad. If they lose another one, they're going to drop way out. So Virginia needs the quality wins, which I think they will get it. St. Louis, I have them up at 20. They have one loss to Minnesota, so that loss is actually looking pretty good for them. And a few quality wins. Don't have any reason to have St. Louis out of the rankings. NC State, you could argue that NC State's a little high. Win over North Carolina. They have one loss against Clemson, I believe. Clemson or Virginia Tech, I think. No, or is it St. Louis? It might be St. Louis. NC State lost to St. Louis, yeah. So that's a quality loss there. Florida State, still in the rankings. You could argue that they could drop out. Still in the AP pool. I still have Florida State high. I like where they're at right now. Illinois, I said I bumped them in. Duke is still really high, in my opinion. Don't think they should be that high. Really no quality wins, 2 losses at home. Don't really like where Duke's at right now. So if you're a Duke fan, I think you're lucky that you're in the AP pool and in my pool. You're pretty lucky there. And Virginia Tech, I'm going to start giving them respect. They just continue to win games. That one loss against Penn State's really hurting them, or I would have them higher. 20-point loss against Penn State. So then some other teams that are right behind Duke, I think you could argue that they could be ahead of Duke, ahead of NC State, maybe ahead of Florida State, and that's about it. Maybe Illinois. You could argue Illinois should be lower. Boise State's right there. They're right on the edge. They need to keep winning. They don't really have the tough schedule ahead of them like other teams do, but that just means they have to keep winning. They've got to keep winning and prove that they're not a fluke. Same with BYU. BYU's picked up a few quality wins. They've got to keep winning. Those 2 losses are really hurting them, but they've got to keep winning, and they'll be in the top 25. UConn's up there as well. Just one tough loss in a tight game. Arkansas, the one loss to Missouri. That was a pretty great game by Missouri, so I'm going to keep Arkansas in consideration. I have them at 29. West Virginia, 3 losses. We've bumped them out. Xavier's right there. Xavier has a few quality wins. That I think they lost to Seton Hall this week. That was a tough one. Oklahoma picked up a great win over West Virginia. Looked great in the first half, not so much second half. But they pulled out a victory, and I think they're a great team. Oklahoma State picked up a big win against Texas Tech in overtime. LSU lost to Florida. Still in consideration. Florida's a good team, and they played them hard. UCLA, I think we kind of got rid of them pretty early, and I think they could potentially play their way back in. I didn't mention Oregon. Oregon, In my opinion, they don't have the strength of schedule that other teams have, but that means Oregon's got to dominate the Pac-12. The Pac-12's down. They've got to dominate UCLA. They've got to dominate Arizona State. They have to win the games against Colorado, against Stanford, against USC, against Utah. They've got to win those games, and they've got to dominate the Pac-12. And I kind of like where Oregon's at right now. That loss to Missouri isn't looking too bad. So, and then UCLA is the next Pac-12 team I have behind them. Pac-12 is really down this year. Michigan State, 3 losses in a row. Don't like the way they're playing right now. Dropped them to 36. Ohio State, a couple losses, couple bad losses. I personally think they're overrated. Just lost to Minnesota last night. Northwestern dropped after a few losses. Drake's right there, undefeated. They don't necessarily have the strength of schedule. I was high on Drake for a while until I started looking at their statistics in their season this year, and I have them at 39 right now. So they're really not even that close. Picked up a big win against Southern Illinois. They've got another one today against Southern Illinois, and they've got to win the games against Loyola Chicago. They play them twice, and Bradley, and then they're looking at the top 25 spot. So we've got some tough games ahead of them. So if they win those games, I'll give them respect. Right now, the teams they've beaten have a combined record of 42-69. They've beaten 2 Division II teams, and their best wins are against Kansas State, who we all know is very bad, and Southern Illinois the other day. Let's get into some fan questions. Techno Nick says, Illinois is too low, and DT Squizzleberry agrees with him. Well, we've already talked about Illinois. 3 losses. They have the semi-quality wins, and so that's good enough to get them in the rankings. But with 3 losses, you can't expect to be a top 10 team. No. Drake should be ranked. We've already talked about Drake. They're undefeated. They're 12-0. They've beaten 2 Division II teams. The teams they've beaten have a combined record of 42-69, so not quite. If you've looked into Drake, you can kind of see that they're not quite there yet. College Basketball Talk says Louisville's too high and Duke shouldn't be ranked. Well, we've talked about Louisville. Louisville might be a tad high, but they lost. They have 1 loss to a top 8 team in Wisconsin. I know it was a bad loss, but Louisville's got some quality wins, and I think they're deserving of the top 25, and I have them at 16. I think that's pretty respectable. Anywhere from really 16 to 22, I think, is a good spot for Louisville. And Duke shouldn't be ranked. We've already talked about that. I agree with you. There's a lot of teams that could take Duke's spot, and a lot of teams have an argument to take Duke's spot. They're right on the edge. Their lack of games should bump them out. I kept them in there. We'll see what they do in their future in the ACC. NCAA Radar says Florida's too high and Illinois is too low. A lot of Illinois fans out there, and I'm going to disagree with you. You could argue that they could be out of the rankings, honestly. You'd have a pretty good argument. Florida's too high. They just beat LSU. They have a semi-quality loss. I'll give it to Florida. And again, like I said, they could be a little bit lower. But I like where Florida's at right now. I like the way they're playing without Keontae Johnson. So that is it for this week. And go ahead and check out. There's a couple good games coming up this week, a couple ranked games. I would love to see how the Big Ten plays out. I would love to see where the Pac-12 finishes. And you got a couple good Pac-12 matchups this week as well. So Colorado's fighting for a spot. Stanford's fighting for a spot. UCLA's fighting for a spot. So you've got a couple good matchups ahead of you this week. And so I'm going to see you next week.